Our scripture reading for this morning comes from the book of Isaiah, chapter 2, verses 2 through 5. Listen for the word of the Lord. In days to come, the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established as the highest of the mountains, and shall be raised above the hills. All the nations shall stream to it. Many peoples shall come and say, "Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us his ways, and that we may walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth instruction, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He shall judge between the nations and shall arbitrate for many peoples. They shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more. O house of Jacob, come, let us walk in the light of the Lord." This is the word of the Lord. You will notice the first lines in our text for this morning are "in days to come." And if we apply simple logic to this text, we will realize that Isaiah is not discussing his current day. Instead, he is focusing on the future. But if we read between the lines, we will be able to see that Isaiah does not want to discuss his current day. Instead, Isaiah is discussing the future because the present is not where he wants to be. And he undoubtedly is not alone in this action, for from time to time we all have veered our attention away from our current reality to focus on anything but our present situation. When we first start to realize that our team will not win this year's championship, the words start to unconsciously come out of our mouths. There will always be next year. When it is 4:55 in the afternoon and the email comes in the inbox right as you are about to grab your coat to head outside for the day, you say to yourself, "I can get it tomorrow." And when that family member comes to you on Thanksgiving to talk about that subject they really want to talk about, but you really don't want to talk about it, you say to yourself, we will talk about it later. We discuss the future when we do not want to be in the present. And at the time of this text, Isaiah's present is demoralizing. During the time that Isaiah was prophesying and speaking texts like ours for this morning, he and the rest of his people were under constant threat of violence. In fact, there was a litany of destruction that was happening all around Isaiah. In 722 BC, the Assyrians completely destroyed the capital of the northern kingdom of Israel and took its people into exile. Just 10 years later, the Assyrian king again attacked the Philistines, which was the immediate western border to Isaiah's homeland of Judah. And in 701 BC, the Assyrians come knocking on Isaiah's front door as they conquer towns around Jerusalem and besiege and invade the city itself. So throughout this prophet's life, he was literally surrounded by brutal violence and war. If Isaiah were to focus his attention not on the future, but instead on his present day, it would sound something like Isaiah chapter 6, verses 11 through 13. Until cities lie waste without inhabitant and houses without people, the land is utterly desolate. until the Lord sends everyone far away, and vast is the emptiness in the midst of the land. Even if a 10th part remain in it, it will be burned again, like a terebinth or an oak, whose stump remains standing when it is felled. It can be difficult listening to Isaiah's discussion of war and peace, especially from our point of view, as people who live in Yardley or Morrisville or central New Jersey. We have a different present reality than Isaiah and the Israelites. Some people in this room have served in the military and could tell us of the unique terrors of war. You who have served may resonate with the words of a fellow soldier in General William Tecumseh Sherman when he said, "War is hell." And while many of us have not known war, none of us have known war in the United States, our home. When listening to the words of Isaiah and his people, we have a unique position. We have one foot in the same water and the rest of our body outside of it, able to resonate, but not completely. We hear of wars and violence going on outside our neighborhoods and can empathize, knowing fear and insecurity ourselves. We have lived events such as September 11th that shook our nation to its bones, and through it knew the reality of grieving as a community, as a city, and as a nation. Yet we do not know the devastation of our entire country or even war on our own soil in the United States, like those of the Israelites. So when Isaiah proclaims that the house of the Lord shall be established as the highest mountain, above the mountains of any other nation, we can hear him knowing that our nation is currently the most powerful and most secure nation in the world. When we hear Isaiah proclaim a message of hope and peace to his people that live the destruction of their homes and the despair of their faith, we know something of destruction and despair, but not entirely. Our current position has us hearing Isaiah's vision of peace and prosperity with a faint hope that this one day may be true, yet we also know all too well the apathy towards this too large a task and the cynicism in such an unrealistic goal for human hands. In other words, while God is revealing through Isaiah a hope that the people of Isaiah's time cannot see entirely because of their despair, we also cannot see it clearly ourselves. We cannot see it clearly due to the fogs of apathy and cynicism. We listen to this text, and when we do listen to this text from our point of view, our vision is distorted and we cannot grasp the full weight of what God reveals in Isaiah. We are left saying, "Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord so that God may teach us God's ways and help us walk God's paths." Good poetry is like Rafiki. Rafiki is a character from the popular 90s movie, The Lion King, which is about an animal kingdom ruled by a family of lions. In the movie Lion King, Rafiki is a monkey whose role is a wise teacher that reveals important life lessons through riddles. So when Rafiki talks in the movie, no one completely understands him. But they always know he is speaking truth. Good poetry is like Rafiki, and that is what we have here in Isaiah chapter 2, verses 2 through 5. When we hear this text, we hear familiar words that do not make complete sense. But Isaiah is using symbols that create a grander vision than any typical grouping of sentences. Isaiah is describing a glorious scene where all different kinds of people from all different places in the earth parade to Jerusalem like a stream of humanity. He creates characters that melt their weapons down and beat them into tools for farming instead of killing. He is painting a picture of people from all over the world gathering together to learn from God how to live in harmony. In this text, Isaiah is revealing a vision of world peace, a time of war no more. Now, I can picture Isaiah wrestling with God when this divine inspiration was taking place. I can see him saying, myself and my people are literally surrounded by war and violence on all sides, and I am supposed to proclaim the future kingdom of peace. I, who live in Jerusalem during the time when this holy city is being invaded and sieged by one of the most powerful forces on earth, I am supposed to be pronouncing a word of hope? I, a mere human who lives amongst other fellow humans who right now know only death, destruction, and despair. I am supposed to combat powers of violence and war with just a few words of poetry? And how great would that moment be when God responds, yes? And Isaiah starts to understand. How great that moment would be when Isaiah starts to realize the power God has revealed to him in this poetry, this tool that no one understands completely, yet knows it is speaking truth. This tool that moves us from the realm of knowing and into the realm of believing. This tool that can know deeply a world of war and violence, yet reveals the truth that one day streams of people, all different kinds of people, will put down their weapons and learn how to live together in harmony. A day when we stop knowing the limits of humanity and start believing in the possibilities of God. A time of war no more. The power of this poetry in Isaiah is more familiar to us than unfamiliar. We as Christians understand the instruction and the word of the Lord that Isaiah discusses to be a baby lying in a barn with animals. And this baby grows up. This baby grows up to teach, to show us how Isaiah's grand vision of world peace can be realized on earth, teaching us not only to love our neighbors, but also to love our enemies, teaching us not only to not murder, but also to be reconciled to those we hate, teaching us not only to love God with all of our heart, with all of our soul, and with all of our strength, but to love all of God's creatures as we would love ourselves. And nothing is more powerful than that. Friends, even though world peace has become, I was fortunate enough to travel to Israel this past April. And when I was there, I met an Israeli man living in the Galilee region named Yuval Roth. One day in 1993, Yuval's brother was kidnapped, shot, and killed by a Hamas unit on his way back from his reserve duty in the military in the Gaza Strip. Yuval's response, hearing of his brother's death, was to join an intentional Palestinian and Israeli bereavement group who mourn the loss of their family members together in the hopes of promoting peace. 10 years after the death of Yuval's brother,